Happy summer, although it doesn't feel as much like summer as it did. So we'll call this meeting to order. And first up, I guess we'll just do the roll call. You want me to read them off, Lucy?
Sure.
All right. Mac McCullough is oh, here. Lee Adams. Jeff Allball. Paul Egnatuk.
Here.
Sonia Elder.
No.
Okay. Did I pronounce that right?
Yep.
Okay. Monique French. I did see her somewhere.
Here.
There you are. Jim Hodsma.
No.
Art Kale.
Nope.
Tommy Miller.
Here.
Mark Newman. No Mark Newman?
Nope.
Okay, I see Mike Knopf's there.
Hello.
Eric Perry.
Not today.
All right. Paulette Porter.
Not today.
Tina Racy for Robert Stapleton.
Nope.
Okay. Barry Scott.
Nope.
Haley Snyder.
Here.
Right. Angela Stewart.
She's not able to join us today.
All right. Kathy Zenda Wilson.
She's also not able to join us.
Probably traveling somewhere again.
She's going through the cure.
Yeah. Paul Watson.
Not today.
All right. Lori Upright.
Yes, I'm here.
And support staff. Is Kelly here?
Yes, here.
Hey, Kelly. Lucy's here, obviously. Aaron Cummings. Caitlin Elias. Elias, I'm sorry. David Hackett.
Present.
Awesome. Lynn, you're here?
Yep, I'm here.
Ziggy?
Nope.
Brent?
Here.
All right. And then Mike. Is he joining us?
Nope, not today.
All right. Okay, so everybody have a chance to take a look at the minutes from the April 11 meeting. Just put the call out right now if anybody has any additions or corrections. I didn't see anything. And if not, if somebody could move for the approval.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
All right. Who's the second?
Support.
Thank you, Monique. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed? All right. And then I guess I bounced the ball back to you, Lucy, for the ACP update.
Sure thing.
right.
I also want to preface by saying that in the future, I won't call this an ACP update. I'll call it a Digital Equity Subcommittee update. And we'll pulled the ACP update into an update from the subcommittee, which you all approved at the last meeting. We did have the first meeting of that subcommittee this past week. It was a really great group. We have a lot of folks who have kind of been like nominated by other folks. We have the head of KCC's Lifelong Learning and the head of the KCC Library. We also have technology instructionist from Albion College, and we also have the director of the Marshall Library joining us on that subcommittee. And the goal with that subcommittee is to look at solutions for bridging the digital divide. And one of the things we talked a lot about that subcommittee and finding a chair for that subcommittee, which is an ongoing process. Also possibly adding a resident or someone who is experiencing some of the issues with adoption. And then we also went through that survey, which we had showed you guys on this meeting last time. And we're just about ready to launch that so that way we can start collecting data about solutions for adoption and things like that, whether it's public Wi-Fi spots, access to devices, things like that. So that subcommittee is ready to work on that. They're very engaged, just got to find a chair. But other than that, I'm really excited about that group. And then as far as the ACP update, I can share a little bit. One of the main things that I wanted to talk to you guys about is that this week is a nationwide run by the U.S. Department of Education, as well as the White House is involved, is a week of action is what they're calling it, to promote the Affordable Connectivity Program, which is the program that we're trying to do education about as well. So we put together a big, pretty comprehensive communications plan for that. The dates of that are June 14th to the 22nd. So it starts tomorrow. We'll be sending a press release to local media as well as administration and townships tomorrow that kind of explain ACP. The goal is that hopefully local media would print it verbatim, which is usually what they do with our press releases. And it has specific instructions on how to enroll. And that's kind of nice because it's interesting, as Lynn and I have been really working through this process of how do we help people sign up for the ACP. So many of the resources are online. But the goal is to help people get online. We can't necessarily assume that they have access to the internet. So that's kind of hopeful, is that, you know, if local media prints it, then it's in the local newspaper and it's step-by-step how to apply for the ACP without needing access to the internet. So that's good. We also have social media posts and stuff like that. I see a hand. Yes, Mac.
Yeah, you know, I'm just kind of like an instant brainstorm. It's festival season. Does it make sense to have informational tables and, you know, kind of like intake kind of thing for people, like, you know, Juneteenth is coming up.
Yeah.
I mean, places, you know, any place where, well, and there's a community event at Claude Evans again, also later this month as well. Yeah, it just
Definitely.
that would be a good time. You know, I don't know who has time to do it, but that would be a good place to meet people where they're at.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know how organized we are to have like a full table, but we did even talk with Veteran Affairs about providing them materials. So like when they do tabling, which they have a handful of tables this year, they can also provide those resources because we know that their population, some of their population is automatically eligible. So definitely that's possible. And you know, maybe we'll reach out for some help on tabling if we get to that place. Right now, I don't know that we have it printed or anything, but we could definitely look at that as an option. I think it's important.
And then the other thought along those lines is, you know, basically places like that are information, but as you said, not everybody necessarily has that kind of access to be able to do the stuff online.
Right.
So,
yeah, I think, you know, even in like, as we think about, you know, future even grants, it would be nice for us to have tablets available or like devices available so people could sign up right there. Because that would also alleviate like needing to send in everything and that sort of thing. So like there's a lot of potential there. That's something we can also bring to the subcommittee in terms of as we think about grant applications.
yeah, and well, you know, another option for that is, you know, people can book appointments at the library to have somebody help them.
Okay.
Book a librarian at this library, and I'll bet Marshall
Yeah.
might have something similar. The Financial Opportunity Center, they have walk-in hours where they, you know, downtown Battle Creek, where they will help people with computer access and use, among other things. So there may be a few of those kind of places where we can direct people as well.
Great. I think that's helpful. That's a good idea. Yeah, I'm feeling a little unprepared for that just because I'd also kind of want to let those orgs know, but I think we could definitely start thinking about, you know, maybe looking in July and August at events that are taking place and seeing about Lynn and I getting out there. So
Yeah, my ideas always come later than you need them. So
that's okay, mine too. And then I also just thought I'd provide this update for the subcommittee. I'm gonna always have like monthly updates about where we're at on our communications plan. And we have completed the kind of outreach with Public Health Department and veterans, various findings from there. The veterans is the most recent group that we met with. And they're really saying that, especially related to the VA Medical Center, they have noticed a lot of issues with connectivity being an issue. And so, you know, Aaron Edelson has said that he can connect us with them. And then, but in general, they're providing resources for folks and kind of actually intentionally removing the barrier of having to access via the internet. So kind of interesting just to know how all that works. But regardless, we did provide him with all the materials that he needs, including qualification letters that are branded for his office, and then also all the applications so that he can print those for his clients.
what was that name again?
Aaron Edelson, he's the director of VA, County VA. And then our current group that we're working with is senior centers. We're going to start meeting with senior centers to talk with them about some of their qualified populations. We also received an email after we sent the broadband update last week from the community manager at Springview Tower in Battle Creek, who is specifically interested in helping his residents connect with ACP. Interestingly, they only have one internet service provider in the building, which is Comcast. And so Comcast is actually going to come and provide instruction on how to sign up for their program for Comcast. So we're really glad to see that, but that's led us to having conversations with him about what's he seeing with connectivity in general. And so it's kind of interesting. So we'll keep having that conversation as well. At the last meeting of the subcommittee, Helen Guzzo is on that committee as well from Senior Millage. And she really, mentioned that there are a lot of these senior facilities where we could kind of tap in. So, maybe leveraging some of the folks who work with senior centers and things like that would be the goal as we move forward. But right now we're focusing on that senior population for ACP. Any questions or comments about ACP or also the digital equity subcommittee? Pretty straightforward. Just wanted to provide that update.
It was a great conversation, really was.
Good. I love that. Love to hear that. Whoops, shared the wrong thing, I think. Nope, I didn't.
Yeah, Jen.
Yep. Okay, so that's
FCC
it for that update.
Go ahead.
So
I
next,
didn't talk over you. Are you doing the FCC map update?
our dear friend Lynn is.
Okay, Lynn.
All right. So in preparation for all this funding that's coming up, we've been trying to make sure that the FCC map is as current as possible. So we have submitted challenges to the FCC for availability. Just to recap, we submitted over 9,000 challenges. And I swear this has been a moving target because every time that I go into the broadband database, the information changes. So I did pull the latest and greatest information from today, so I can give that to you guys. So in the process, we challenged 5 different ISPs. We did not hear directly from all of them. And I'll start with the first one, AT&T. We submitted 40 challenges with them, and they only have 1 pending and 1 conceded, and 38 were overturned. So what they did was, so the process is the ISP has to submit evidence to the FCC. And so what AT&T did was they ran specifically each address in their website database and printed or made a PDF of whether it had service or not, or if it was serviceable or not, and uploaded that to the FCC. So they did a really good job of being able to prove what service was available. And so that's why 38 of them were overturned. They actually do have service. And there's only 1 pending and 1 that was upheld. Now for Charter, we did 37 challenges. All they submitted as evidence to dispute was a form letter saying that locations were served. And so 29 of those are still pending, and 8 of them were conceded or upheld. Then we'll go to WOW Cable. We submitted about 1,100 challenges, and they have ignored it, and they have all been conceded. So they submitted no evidence to the contrary. They just went in and conceded the 1,100 challenges. So those are all will be as unserved. So those will show as unserved.
Yeah, if the ISP doesn't respond, then FCC concedes those points.
Yes,
So it's not the ISP saying you're right, we don't serve those, but it is the FCC coming in and saying, well, since the ISP hasn't provided a sufficient evidence, we're going to say that those are not served. And so because WOW didn't respond at all,
well, here's where I think the difference lies that I was trying to figure out today, the difference between WOW and Comcast. So WOW actually says conceded. Comcast locations don't say conceded, they say that they were upheld.
right, well, you
So-
should give us the Comcast story.
So Comcast, we submitted over 8,000 challenges for Comcast. And pretty much immediately about 1,100 of those were conceded. What they did was they uploaded a form letter as their initial evidence. And then they submitted their final evidence as well. But they contacted us because they wanted to, talk about these challenges, because they could see that a lot of what we challenged to them was serviceable. And so when we met with them, they were adamant that, there were 6,000 locations that are categorized as serviceable because Comcast can provide service, or they have provided service to those. And then there were 900 locations that are categorized as serviceable based on other availability protocol that they have. So what they were saying was basically, yes, they agree with about 1,000 of them, but there's these other ones that according to their maps show us that they are serviceable. We understood that. We asked them to give to us the location data for those, so we can see what addresses they are, so we know what locations that they're talking about. And then with an NDA, we would be able to get the additional address information from them. So we asked them for those two things. And they, it was our understanding then, once we got that information, then we would update the FCC. And we would not really withdraw those, but those would be then marked as overturned, meaning that they were correct. And so, but what happened was, when I went in there today, as of basically every challenge has been upheld. So the FCC has upheld all of our challenges with Comcast because the form letter that they provided as evidence to the FCC is inadequate as evidence. So what the FCC put into that challenge box was that the evidence submitted is insufficient to establish that the reported speed or technology is offered at the challenged location. So the FCC didn't like the data or lack of data that Comcast did not provide them. So at some point, we do expect that to change, though, because we needed the most accurate map as we can. And this is not making the FCC map accurate. So what we're finding is the FCC is getting to the point where I think they are just upholding these challenges, even though they might not be correct.
Because 30 days is gone by.
Because the 30 days is coming up at the end of this month. It's like the 26th. So that's the thing. There is still a little bit of time for them to, fix these things. But yeah, as of right now, we only have 30 pending challenges. And the majority has been conceded.
I anticipate that Comcast will throw a massive fit and will challenge FCC very quickly.
Yeah.
In order to correct those 6,000,
Mhm.
8,000,
Think of it, 6,000 here.
1,000.
They cover a lot of turf.
Right, definitely.
And the majority of those are around Battle Creek, on the outskirts of Battle Creek that we're talking about.
Hey, Lynn, can you remind the group, because when you say, anticipate Comcast will get that corrected, I mean, we challenged them for a reason, and we had some evidence to believe that they weren't serviceable. So can you remind us how we determined maybe that those 8,000 from Comcast were not serviceable? So I guess I'm wondering why you're skeptical that maybe our information was wrong.
Well, we know that using the evidence from the FCC map and the MyHigh map, we knew that there were going to be areas that we were challenging that maybe didn't need to be challenged. But because we were solely using the infrastructure evidence that we had, we figured there would be some areas that were challenged that would get overturned.
Definitely, because we knew that the MyHigh infrastructure map, which was the only real evidence that we had to base these challenges off of, was not complete for Calhoun County. But that's all that we had for evidence, because they wouldn't take crowdsourced data, which is what the merit data was considered. And so we had to use the infrastructure map that wasn't complete for all of Calhoun County in order to gauge that where we were challenging. So when we chatted with Comcast, they said that these 8,000 address points, 6,000, no, 6,000, the 6,000 that are kind of in question, they said that they either have already served those locations or that they can serve them within 10 days at no cost to the consumer for, you know, in terms of like building out fiber or something like that. And we felt like that was probably accurate.
But Comcast has not given us that information to prove that yet.
They were gonna share that data with us.
Yes,
With the ND.
Mhm.
which we did follow up with Comcast this week on Monday, and Ben Miller is checking on the status. So that's where we're at with Comcast challenges.
And remember, ISPs are allowed to keep their networks to themselves, not share it with the public.
Right.
And to some degree, that's why we really wanted that data, was because then we're able to see more of like actual facts coming from Comcast about where they serve, which isn't something that we have access to. Like Max said, it's not something that they've made available. And so they do want us to sign an NDA in order to have access to it. But then we would be able to use that data, especially working with Brent on pulling all of this information together about where in Calhoun are people served and where are they not.
Yeah. The only other thing I wanted to mention about the map challenges, just in general, Merit had a meeting on Friday that I wasn't able to attend, but I did get some facts from them that they discussed. So the Michigan map, about 60,000 challenges moved homes to unserved. So the challenges moved about 60,000 to the unserved category. However, 130,000 challenges moved locations from unserved to underserved. I thought that was interesting. And then something that Lucy will follow up on here is that Michigan had the greatest change in the estimated BEAD allocation, which this is not good news for Michigan, but that was also discussed some at the meeting. So the next step for map challenges, as we finish up with the ones that we've done here, is Michigan is going to have their own map challenge so they can have the most accurate maps when they are going to allocate the BEAD funding. So they're going to use the FCC map as a starting point, but they're going to take in data from counties to help make the best map that they can for allocating this funds. But that's not estimated to start until January of 24.
And by that, by the state, you mean MyHigh.
MyHigh.
MyHigh will have its own map.
That's all I have.
Any questions for Lynn? Don't see any hands. Good report, Lynn. Thank you. Are you doing the BEAD update, Lucy, or is that Lynn too?
Yeah, I'll give a little update on BEAD. So just some background on what BEAD is. So Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Grant Program. This is the second grant funding that we're looking at for expansion of broadband in Michigan and in, specifically in Calhoun County. The first was the Robin grant, which was through the state of Michigan, Realizing Opportunity Broadband Infrastructure Networks, something like that. That's probably wrong. But so Robin, right now, we're still waiting to hear from the state about not only, of course, we're waiting on who and what ISPs will be awarded grant dollars. We anticipate, we've been told that will be Labor Day. Although we were hoping that around Memorial Day, we would have a sense of even just the internet service providers that applied. However, MyHigh hasn't released that information, so we don't really have a sense of who has applied for Robin, besides what we knew about because we had offered support letters, which was for Comcast and ACD.net. Those applications we know for sure are with the Robin grant in the MyHigh office and are being reviewed. So that's still waiting. But the real reason why we've been really excited about the BEAD grant program is because it's much, much larger. This is the one that we were anticipating was about $1.5 to $1.7 billion for the state of Michigan. And the other thing that makes BEAD grant different than Robin was that government entities can apply. And so that's really interesting. It really puts us a little bit more in a driver's seat potentially in order to find solutions to expand broadband in Michigan. One thing that I want to say about that, going back to the Merit conference. So Lynn and I went to the Merit Network conference about 3 weeks ago or so. I sat on a panel at that conference related to the merit survey that we had done with Ingham County and Ottawa County, and that was fine. It went well. Kind of a boring topic if you ask me, but one of the really interesting things that really came up in that conference that I wanted to mention to you all is this project that's happening in Livingston County. And it was brought up a lot throughout the course of this conference because they're really getting moving on this project. And it really is a new way of thinking about, especially BEAD applications. So what Livingston has decided to do is that they are building a middle mile network. You might remember that the CTC report suggested a middle mile network. What a middle mile network is it basically for Calhoun or, Livingston in this case, it connects buildings with fiber and basically it creates a network for that organization. So for Calhoun County, it can connect, Justice Center, Toller, Road Department, even the buildings out in Albion. A middle mile network could also connect township buildings as well, and then providing really high speed, quality, reliable fiber to those organizations. And then there's some cost savings for Calhoun in that sort of situation because we're not leasing fiber from others, we kind of own it. So Livingston has decided to move forward with that. And something that's interesting is that Livingston at the same time is also entering into a partnership, a public-private partnership with Lit Communities. You might have also heard about Lit Communities because Lit Communities did reply to Calhoun County's RFP about broadband when we issued it in December. At the time, we felt like it was way too good to be true because what it said was that they were going to wire fiber to the premise for every single home in Calhoun County, and they would reimburse us and for a little bit of it, and that they would manage it as an ISP within that community. And that's how they would just do fiber to the premise for every single household, not asking really for anything from us. And we had gone to CTC and asked them about it. They had the same opinion we did, which just felt a little too good to be true. We hadn't heard of this organization before. They have 2 networks in the country. And it was a little bit like, how would they do this? And even CTC felt that, and they're these engineering, consultants, they were feeling the same way. It's not totally clear on how that would work. But what Livingston is doing is they're saying, we're going to own the middle mile network. And then Lit Communities builds the fiber to the premise off of that middle mile network that connects all of the buildings in Livingston. And because it's a middle mile network for all of their buildings, it is a countywide network that connects, from every part of the county. And then Lit Communities just builds off of that, which I was really surprised by that. And I was surprised I hadn't thought of it sooner, because I think it's interesting to think that then who owns the fiber. That's how they figure out how to connect to solid fiber without having to lease it from, Weir County leases from CTS, or MetroNet is now CTS. So that's a way to do it. So it's really interesting because we're just seeing the ways that other communities are trying to figure this problem out. Because the thing is that, and what we saw with Robin, and technically what we would see with BEAD, is that these applications for grant dollars are just for unserved and underserved households. That's the only place that those are allowed to go, which means that because to me, I feel like one of our problems is, how do we reach the city of Battle Creek? We know that the city of Battle Creek doesn't have as strong of connection. A lot of it's fixed wireless, and so the connection isn't as strong. And so how do you get fiber to the premise in Battle Creek when you can't use these grants? To some degree, this is a solution, because you have middle mile that's going into the city, and then the ISP is building off of that into the community. So it's very, very, very interesting. Very interesting. We'll see how it goes for them. One of the things that we came up with, we learned at that conference also, that MyHigh's there, just about their whole staff was there, including Eric Frederick, who runs the MyHigh office. Ben Feynman, who's the Michigan contact for the NTIA, was there. We networked with a lot of folks that we see at these meetings every time. And everyone's just kind of interested in what's happening in Livingston. So I thought I would share that, because I think it's really relevant for us, especially because we have talked about middle mile networks. We have talked with Lit Communities.
I do have something I wanted to add to that. Something that I learned from the conference that goes along with the Livingston model is I did a session on open access with Bruce Patterson, and some of you on the call will definitely recognize that name. He was able to explain to me how you make a network profitable. Doesn't mean that I necessarily understand it all, but what he talked about is there's different layers to this, and there's a reason why open access networks don't always work. And that's because you need to separate the owner, the operator, and the service provider. Once you take those pieces apart, no one entity is getting the profits, right? And so it promotes competition in a way that is good for everybody. The owner, they have their piece, the operator has their piece, and the service provider also has their piece. Now, I'm not the expert. I can't explain all the nuances like Bruce Patterson did. And if it's something that we want to talk about more, we can definitely do that. But that's part of it when it goes into this middle mile setting is, when you have that owner of the middle mile, then you also are breaking those layers apart. So then you have an ISP that is providing service to the residents, and maybe another ISP would want to get on that middle mile and provide service to those residents. So that's just another piece of it I wanted to share.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think,
I
go
wanted
ahead.
to add that when I went out there, it's just astounding, the introduction of competition. So their consumers, their subscribers, whatever they're called, their residences, they have the choice, whether you're a business or home. They each have different choices of ISPs, and they can switch like instantly. I mean, you sit down at your computer and you choose another one, and it's driven the cost of what a lot of people 25.3 is just perfectly adequate, right? It's incredibly cheap. $30 is a lot of money compared to what people have to pay there for real basic internet access. So yeah, that sounds very intriguing to me. The idea of introducing competition will benefit consumers and the county.
And I think, for me, I really just want you all to be aware that also that other communities are finding solutions. And we are much more aware of our situation in Calhoun than many other communities are. We've also built a lot of relationships. Lit community still very much wants to talk with us. And so one thing that we need to start thinking about, and that's why this is on the agenda the way that it is that in Calhoun, we need to start thinking about what our plan is for this grant application. And so, whether that's, I don't know if it's a smaller group or if, maybe a smaller group works on it and we just keep bringing it to you guys here, but that's definitely something that we need to start thinking about. Talking with Kelly, we think that the step for that is to find a grant writer. Because it is regardless, BEAD is a massive grant that, is a huge undertaking. And so we want to find a grant writer who can help us with that. So we are starting that process. I would ask all of you on this call and on the task force, if you know of grant writers who have done federal grants within the community, we would be interested in that. We are looking at the state level as well for grant writers through the Merit Network. And then also through the Michigan Association of Counties, they also have some grant writers that we can tap into. So just know that, this is kind of these topics that we're thinking about. At the conference, we also learned that BEAD will cover middle mile. So that could be a potential route for how would county make a middle mile network happen. It could be through BEAD potentially if we had a successful application. So wanted to share that. The other part of this BEAD update, which Lynn alluded to related to the fiber maps, is that and we're still trying to understand because we just learned this within the last 2 days from a couple different, last week, from a couple different sources, from both Merit as well as from Mike Watsa, our legal counsel, which is that the Michigan BEAD allocation has been reduced as far as we can tell. And granted, NTIA hasn't said specifically how much each state is getting. So there's still more to learn about this. There's still an official word that has to come out. But what we're hearing is that Michigan overall, which was about $1.5 billion, the allocation for Michigan has been reduced by about $400 million. So that's a hit, to some degree. The reason for that, what we're learning is that it's actually because of fixed wireless. They are going to start considering fixed wireless as served. And because of that, some of our, and it's interesting because Mike is suggesting also that there's like some interpretation of what fixed wireless is, and that has led to the reduction for the state of Michigan. But regardless, considering fixed wireless as served would definitely change the numbers in terms of how much the state of Michigan, and anywhere, but in our case for the state of Michigan, how much we would get. So we anticipate that the amount of BEAD funding for the state of Michigan is going to be less than what we've been saying.
No, I don't.
Okay, the other guy.
I'm gonna unmute Monique. Anyone have anything to share about, or to any questions or anything about BEAD funding, and even just thinking about county planning for BEAD?
I just didn't hear what was being said there just now.
I think it was Monique had someone in the background, but doesn't look like she has anything to add.
No, I've been muted the whole meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
Anyone else
I
have
just wanted
something to
make
share?
sure I didn't miss something.
Yep. So that's just something to anticipate, ongoing conversations about BEAD grant program and, definitely what is Calhoun's approach? Because to some degree, we can do our BEAD application the way that we did the Robin application, which is to work with an internet service provider, especially because we've already established strong relationships with ISPs. And we have a sense of what they're planning on doing. And as we hear from Robin and we hear about whether Calhoun receives any Robin funds, we'll even have a better understanding of what ISPs might want to do. And there might be some potential for Calhoun to get creative with that grant application. And I think that's something that we would need the task force to help us with forming that idea. That's it for BEAD, I think.
So I do have a question. With the reallocation, will that really, will it impact what we're trying to do?
Good question. It's hard to say. I mean, really, out of 1.5 billion, the loss of 400 million is significant, but there's still a whole lot of money there that we could potentially tap into and still be able to increase access in Calhoun County. Where we could potentially see an impact is by considering fixed wireless served. That would reduce the number of households in Calhoun County that are considered served or unserved, because more households have fixed wireless. For instance, like East Leroy, they have a lot of fixed wireless there. If you ask a resident, they would say that it's very challenging because the minute, if it's 5 o'clock and there are a lot of people online, their speeds reduce dramatically, or, various reasons they might have high latency and they don't have really reliable internet. That's kind of the problem with fixed wireless, is that it's not as reliable or as high speed as fiber. And so that is the concern. And Lynn and I are really dedicated to understanding more about what that fixed wireless component means for who is considered served in Calhoun County.
Thank you.
I would add to that, Commissioner French. So let's say Michigan gets 1.5 billion. Our initial estimates to do the whole county with fiber was in excess of 300 million. So, I mean, if there are 5 counties trying to do something that big, the money's gone. So it's going to be a competitive process. I don't believe it's going to be sort of an allocation and we would get our proportionate share. I mean, it's important that we know what our proportionate share is and we know what the need is, but there's still not going to be enough to go around. And some of it depends on what happens with the companies that bid for the Robin funding. I mean, if Comcast gets this Robin grant and really does a $25 million project, fills a lot of the gaps, that might be good. That might be good momentum for us. I think we're also positioned well with the new Ford battery plant development. It's obviously seen as a big economic development growth opportunity for our county. So, we hear just anecdotally from our congressional representatives and state representatives that, we're positioned well to leverage federal dollars like this because the infrastructure is so important to that overall growth. So, I mean, I'm optimistic, but also skeptical. And I don't know that, the reduction of a few $100 million sounds like a lot of money, but the reduction of what Michigan gets is really a predictor of what Calhoun County could get and what we could do.
Nice. Well said, Kelly.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts or updates from anybody on the call that you'd like to share with the group?
Is there any other counties like up Northway or like in the UP that are trying to do the same thing?
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of communities in up north or even in the UP have actually been really successful already with fiber. It's really kind of wild, especially working with the universities. They've done a lot of fiber projects that have brought fiber into really rural parts. It's a mixed bag because some haven't done anything. And so now they're really struggling. One group that was very vocal at the Merit Conference and that Lynn and I have kind of learned a lot from is Beaver Island. They really want fiber out there. And especially because, they don't even have cell service really. There's a whole lot that they struggle with. And so they would like to get fiber out there. And their whole conversation is that conversation of, it's not going to be profitable. We cannot look at this as how do we make profit for ISPs, because in especially very rural areas, and this is a conversation we've had in Calhoun, which is how do we get, to our most rural areas if we're kind of thinking about it from a profit model. Might not be possible, but we still recognize that there's a need there, and Beaver Island's like, this is all we need it to connect with the world. And so just really interesting conversations about how do you do it. And so that it definitely, and all of them are kind of different, with the ones that are connected to universities in the UP, they're really working with the education, then you kind of also have to like enroll in a class in order to have access to it, which is a little tricky. So, but there's just a lot of different models for how they're trying to bring fiber to homes.
So Lucy, I do have another question, because earlier you were saying about possibly trying to find a grant writer to assist with the submission for the grant.
Yes.
So have you started looking, or is there a process or qualifications you look for? Because I know like writing those federal grants can be very tedious.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. We have started in the sense of we've kind of tapped into who we know already. We did ask Ben Feynman if he would suggest anyone because he's the guy who knows NTIA and knows the BEAD grant. He didn't give us anybody, but he did mention that Merit has grant writers. Merit, which we work with a lot with the survey and then also with the MAP challenge, they have a relationship with an organization called the Grants Office, which is technically a national organization that has a Michigan office with grant writers. You know, that is a path that we can take. I imagine that as we're starting to look into grant writers, we will look into that. But in general, I haven't felt very much like those people were engaged with us locally. And I think that that's important. And so we're going to keep looking. Kelly had a couple of suggestions through the Michigan Association of Counties that we have yet to reach out to, but we'll definitely do that. And then also, you know, some sort of a request process probably makes sense. And so that's something that we could look at as well.
Okay. I asked that question because, you know, when they put those RFPs out, it's a quick turnaround.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah,
Well,
definitely.
we kind of know a few, I mean, we know a little bit about the timeline. So, you know, the BEAD grant guidelines haven't even been developed by the state of Michigan. So we definitely can't start now on writing the grant because we don't even have the rules or the application. It'd also be nice to know, I mean, what Lucy said, if the private sector is going to apply for these grants and we feel comfortable that that's the best solution for Calhoun County, they're going to write their grants themselves and we don't need to. We also, as soon as the MyHigh office shares more information on the Robin grant, and assuming they design the BEAD grant similarly, we have all kinds of sample grant applications from other counties for that. I mean, so we may be able to pull it off ourselves. I think it's just good to be thinking about if we need to bring in extra resources, where would we find them? And like you said, if it needs to be a quick turnaround, we should start looking and just be aware of how to get that assistance if needed. I mean, the county, our department heads, to be honest, write grants all the time. We have one on our board agenda for Thursday night, which is also a federal grant similar to BEAD that comes through the president's new bipartisan infrastructure bill. You know, it's just not as complicated. But what we have are the pieces, right? We have the study from CTC, we have the data. So I'm not entirely saying I don't think our county staff can handle it, but I just think it would be good for us to start making sure we have a deep enough bench if we're gonna, especially if we were gonna do something big or on our own, like try to get a middle mile project in place where it would be us owning it. And then you get into the complexities of who owns, who operates, and trying to design that whole system is a much bigger process.
Definitely. And I kind of see a grant writer helping us with that organization of our thoughts as well. So, yeah, it's ongoing and we'll, you know, keep looking at what resources we can tap into.
Thank you.
Updates, any other questions or thoughts? Well, if not, I guess we'll open it up to citizens. I don't know if we have any citizens.
Nope, not today, just us.
Okay. So we covered everything, Lucy, Kelly, Lynn?
Yep. I would love, actually, before we end, Lee Adams, if you have anything to share about the work that you're doing in Kalamazoo.
Yeah, actually I'm learning from you guys. You guys are further down the line than the group in Kalamazoo that I'm helping. So this has actually been really helpful for me. I'm a little disappointed because the grant writer that I knew that would be able to help with this just got a full-time job and he's no longer taking side grants. So
Sure.
Unfortunately, I don't have a name for grant writing services either.
That's okay. Are you guys working on map challenges in Kalamazoo?
Yes, but we're in the process of sending. So what we did was we took the My High Office maps, looked at the coverage there, and then we assumed that there was some kind of a buffer around where they thought existing coverage was. So we took a half mile from on either direction of where their coverage is, and then started plugging those addresses into the ISP's service locator tools to see if they identified as having coverage. And then
Yeah.
we're going to validate that with local surveys to come up with our map challenges.
Okay, great. Much more, you guys are getting into it.
Yeah, yeah,
Water's
it's a bit
fine.
overwhelming. So, and then ISPs like AT&T will cap the number of addresses you can plug in at a time, because I don't know why, they have some safeguard tool there. So we have to batch them at like 30 at a time, and then the contract we're using uses a VPN to create a new IP address, and then
Wow,
does 30 set of 30 addresses. Yeah, it's a bit of a process.
wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, if there's nothing else for the good of the order, I guess we can
Mac,
adjourn.
I just thought of one more thing. I'm sorry. Are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, sure. Please go ahead.
The last thing I want to mention is that our legal consultant, Kitch Law Firm, is working on trying to get revised legislation, because right now the state laws don't line up with the flexibility even in the BEAD grant notice of funding opportunity that says local governments are able to apply. We have state laws that are contrary to that. So anyway, he's working on getting bills introduced and is advising us, based on past experience, that if and when that happens, we may end up with some of the service providers or their lobbyists trying to stop that and limit the eligible applications to the private sector. They may be contacting any of you, any of us who are, trying to support this effort. So I guess I would just encourage, if you can let us know if you get any reach outs from, related to proposed legislation. We will get some good talking points from the Michigan Association of Counties and, our other advocacy groups that can explain why, that revised legislation is not only helpful, but necessary for local governments to play whatever role we need to just to make this happen. So stay tuned, but just a heads up in case, you start getting approached by somebody and you're not quite sure what they're talking about. The bills had not been introduced yet, so they're not in the pipeline yet.
Thanks for the heads up. And if there's nothing else, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Make a motion
Thank
to
you.
adjourn the meeting.
And Paul supports. All in favor? Aye. All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your
you.
time. Good meeting. Thank you, Lucy, Kelly, Lynn, for all your work.
Thank you. See ya.
See ya.
Bye, everybody.